Walter Pacheco's checkered past dates at least as far back as 2018, when his ex-girlfriend accused him of stalking her and petitioned the court for order of protection against him. She struggled to navigate the often confusing and complicated court system effectively, and when the restraining order expired, the judge declined to renew it due to a lack of evidence. In 2020, Pacheco became a police officer for the Carroll, Iowa Police Department. He resigned the following year due to inappropriate actions with two people. Pacheco went on to work for the Eagle Grove Police Department for 5 months before he was fired due to alleged misconduct while working crowd control at a bar. According to records, Pacheco was hired to patrol the venue, where a crowd of more than 200 people gathered. He got into a confrontation with several attendees and proceeded to turn his body cam off several times throughout the evening. Pacheco claimed that he turned the camera off because there was nothing worth recording, but by doing so, he violated department policy. Moreover, he was heard complaining to a firefighter about the intoxicated crowd and how he would rather shoot people than arrest them. He later claimed it was just a joke, but his superiors took his behavior seriously and he was terminated. In 2022, Pacheco was accused of continuing to contact a woman for several months after she told him to leave her alone. The victim was barraged with unwanted text messages, actual letters, and unannounced visits to her home and workplace. Pacheco pleaded guilty to felony willful injury and misdemeanor stalking and received a 7-year suspended prison sentence along with 5 years of probation. But by the time his sentencing date rolled around, he was facing even more charges for showing up at the victim's gym and lurking outside her home. In April of 2024, the judge overseeing Pacheco's multiple cases revoked his probation and sentenced him to 19 years in prison. His sentence was later extended by 2 years due to protective order violations. Pacheco was found guilty of yet another stalking charge in July of 2024 and could face up to 10 years of additional prison time. A sentencing date has not yet been set. Number 7. Stephen Zelich. By the winter of 2017, former Milwaukee police officer Stephen Zelich was given a total of 70 years behind bars for the murder of 2 women he dumped along the same stretch of rural Wisconsin roadway. Zelich initially maintained that both deaths had been accidental and the result of consensual rough play during intercourse. The ex-cop had talked to women on bondage websites under the alias Mr. Handcuffs and searched for submissive partners that would engage in master-slave intimate relations. He met Jenny James online when she was in her late teens and living in the Oregon foster system. Zelich messaged her for 6 months and they reconnected after she turned 18. The ex-cop convinced her to delete her social media accounts, cut off contact with loved ones, and move to Wisconsin to live with him. In August of 2012, the teen bought a one-way ticket to Milwaukee. She met Zelich and he took her to a Kenosha hotel. They had relations, during which James was restrained, gagged, and had her hands bound behind her back. While she was immobilized, Zelich fatally choked her with a rope. He placed her remains in a suitcase and took them to his apartment, where he kept them in his refrigerator. Zelich then dumped the suitcase with her body in tall grass along a portion of a rural roadway in Genoa, Wisconsin. In November of the following year, the ex-cop met 37-year-old Laura Simonson through a BDSM website and they met up in Minnesota. He killed her in the same manner as he had James and stored the body in a suitcase which he dumped in the same area. Both bodies were found by a highway worker on June the 5th of 2014. Simonson was bound, naked, had a ball gag in her mouth and rope around her neck. Zelich continued accessing bondage websites after the 2 murders, and the authorities believed he would have claimed more victims if not for his arrest on June the 27th of 2014. He was given a 35-year sentence after admitting first-degree reckless homicide in James' case and then 25 years after pleading guilty to second-degree murder in the Simonson case. 10 more years were added to his sentence in October of 2017 for the charges of hiding corpses. Simonson's teenage daughter said of Zelich, "While he rots in a cell, maybe he'll realize what kind of pain and suffering he's brought to so many people." After sentencing him for the Simonson murder, Judge Pamela King reportedly held back tears as she told the ex-cop, "Mr. Zelich, a human life is not something to be played with." Number 6. Marcus Johnson. On April the 9th of 2024, law enforcement in Jackson, Mississippi, responded to reports of a shooting at the apartment of 25-year-old Carlos Collins. The man was found dead after he'd been shot multiple times and repeatedly struck with a blunt object. An axe was also reportedly used during the brutal attack for months leading up to his death. Collins had been harassed by his ex-boyfriend, former Jackson police officer Marcus Johnson. They'd dated for about a year, ended in late 2023. Collins, who worked as a nurse at Mississippi Baptist Medical Center, requested multiple restraining orders following repeated incidents of stalking from Johnson. After the breakup, Collins found trackers and ear tags on his car. He believed that Johnson had installed a Ring camera at a vacant apartment near his residence in order to monitor him. He at one point awoke as the ex-cop was watching him sleep. Collins' sister said of Johnson, "It was obsession, fatal attraction. He didn't want anyone else to be with my brother." An arrest warrant in Johnson's name was released, and the authorities were told to be on the lookout for his black Honda. He was spotted by Vicksburg police and a chase ensued that also involved a Mississippi Highway Patrol trooper. Johnson crossed into Louisiana, where the pursuit was joined by Delta, Louisiana Marshal's Office, the Madison Parish Sheriff's Office, and Louisiana State Police. Johnson was able to evade several spike strips set up by law enforcement before Richland Parish deputies were able to successfully deflate his tires in Rayville. His car rolled to a stop and he was taken into custody, after which he was extradited to Mississippi. Updates on the case indicated that the 33-year-old was held without bond on charges of murder and shooting into an occupied dwelling. Johnson had been employed by the Jackson Police Department only for about 8 months. He resigned in 2013, but was reportedly on the verge of being terminated, allegedly due to disciplinary issues. In 2014, he was arrested and charged with false pretense, grand larceny, and 2 counts of impersonating an officer. Johnson had stolen a police radio from his former department and also had an old ticket book. While at the Palisades Apartments near Jackson State University, he issued a false citation to a female student using another officer's badge number. The victim told the police that Johnson tried to hook up with her in exchange for him dropping the ticket. The outcome of that case was unclear, but it was reported that some of the charges had been dropped and that Johnson had entered a pretrial diversion program in 2015. Number 5. Matthew Farwell. In August of 2024, Matthew Farwell, a former police detective in Stoughton, Massachusetts, was charged with the murder of his former lover, 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore. Farwell had started talking to Birchmore in 2012 when she was in her mid-teens, and they soon began a physical relationship. It continued after Farwell got married and, at his proposition, came to involve elements of abuse fantasies. Birchmore would pretend to be the victim of Farwell's simulated assaults, meant to punish her for getting bad grades, having intercourse with other people, or lying. Farwell, in the meantime, had 2 children with his wife. An examination of his communication with Birchmore indicated that she gave him an ultimatum. In October of 2020, she asked that he get her pregnant as well, threatening to go public with the relationship if he didn't. He agreed, and in December, Birchmore texted Farwell to tell him she was 3.5 weeks pregnant, vowing to keep the child. She sent him a photo of a poster she'd made to celebrate the news, and it read, "Congrats, we are going to be parents." Farwell's wife was 8 months pregnant with their 3rd child at the time. He and Birchmore argued over text about her pregnancy, with Farwell complaining he'd never had a choice in the matter. Birchmore demanded he be present during labor and that he sign the birth certificate. As tensions grew, the man told her, "You are truly the worst person on the face of the earth." They met in late December, and subsequent messages indicated that an altercation had occurred. Birchmore confided in 2 people about the relationship, telling both that Farwell had attacked her in a fit of rage, claiming that the baby wasn't his and that he wished she just would die. One of the people in question alerted Stoughton police about the relationship, and Farwell subsequently berated Birchmore over text. A few days later, the young woman told a friend that Farwell had been to her home, noting that he was behaving strangely. He reportedly looked through her bathroom and closet before asking for a copy of her apartment key and the passcode to the building's front door. Birchmore's conversations in late January indicated that she was planning for the baby's future. She asked Farwell for baby name options, but he claimed he would rather discuss the matter in person. On the evening of February the 1st, he asked the woman if he could come by her home, and she responded that the door would be open for him. CCTV captured him entering the apartment at 9:15 p.m. with the hood of his sweatshirt pulled up and wearing a surgical face mask. He left about half an hour later. On February the 4th, a colleague of Birchmore called the police after she hadn't shown up for work. Law enforcement went to her apartment and found her dead. She was seated on the ground with a strap around her neck that was tied to a closet doorknob. Birchmore had been dead for days and was wearing the same clothes she'd had on when surveillance cameras captured her picking up a DoorDash order on February the 1st. While cleaning her apartment, relatives found a homemade sign with the words, "Congratulations, you're going to be a father," that featured glitter sprinkled over an ultrasound photo. Among a number of baby-related items, they also came upon an unpackaged stroller. Birchmore had had physical relationships with other partners, including Farwell's twin brother and fellow police officer William. When he was interviewed on February the 11th of 2021, he admitted that they'd been intimate as recently as 2020. According to the state police report, which was obtained by the Boston Globe, William told investigators that he was aware of the pregnancy and that his brother was the father. Several days after Birchmore's body was discovered, Farwell was interviewed about his own relationship with her. He falsely claimed that the affair had started in 2020 and that they'd only slept together a few times. He admitted to having been to Birchmore's apartment on February the 1st and that they'd had an argument, but denied having any knowledge about what happened to her. Birchmore's death wasn't initially treated as a homicide, but that changed when a forensic pathologist hired by her family determined she'd been murdered in June of 2024. Towards the end of August, a 38-year-old Farwell was arrested by the FBI in Revere and charged with one count of killing a witness or victim, to which he pleaded not guilty. Number 4. Jerry Bowens. In January of 2008, NYPD undercover narcotics officer Jerry Bowens was arrested following a sting by the Brooklyn South Narcotics Squad. The investigation had been launched over a female drug informant with whom Bowens had reportedly been intimate. Told the authorities that he was part of a group of rogue officers. Bowens and Sergeant Michael Aranella were accused in court papers of taking confiscated drugs and cash and using them to pay confidential informants. A scandal ensued, leading to reassignments of high-level police commanders and the appointment of a new head of the department's narcotics division. Bowens pleaded guilty to third-degree criminal sale of a controlled substance and retired from the force. He agreed to testify against the others arrested alongside him, including Sergeant Aranella and Detective Sean Johnstone, Officer Julio Alvarez, and Officer Jason Arbini. Before he could testify, however, Bowens went on a rampage. On March the 8th of 2009, he and his girlfriend, Catherine D'Onofrio, stopped by the apartment of the latter's friend, Melissa Simmons, in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. While there, Bowens followed D'Onofrio into the bathroom, brandished a pistol, and shot her in the head. When 28-year-old Simmons went to check on them, he shot her as well. A bullet struck the woman in the arm and another grazed her head. Simmons survived, while D'Onofrio was pronounced dead at Bellevue Hospital Center. Bowens subsequently called the authorities in Staten Island and said he would surrender at a local precinct. Law enforcement spotted him en route while driving in D'Onofrio's Toyota Camry. Fearing he was armed and dangerous, officers blocked the Camry with heavy vehicles and ordered Johnson out at gunpoint when he was about a block from the 120th precinct. Inside the vehicle, they found a loaded .357 Magnum and a semi-automatic rifle. The pistol was the weapon he'd used to kill D'Onofrio and wound Simmons. Bowens was also found to be in possession of a hit list, which the media likened to that in the Clint Eastwood film The Deadpool. Among the names on the list were D'Onofrio, Simmons, and Johnson's lawyer, Edward Mandery, who'd represented him in his previous drug case. Bowens was escorted to the 120th precinct on foot and reportedly told an officer, "You should have shot me. I was going to shoot you guys." He was ultimately handed a 40-year sentence in February of 2011 after pleading guilty to D'Onofrio's second-degree murder and to the attempted second-degree murder of Simmons. Number 3. Ray Lewis. Towards the end of the Occupy Wall Street protests in November of 2011, retired Philadelphia police captain Ray Lewis was arrested. The manifestations, which originated in New York City's financial district, were focused on greed, corruption, social and economic inequality, and the undue influence of corporations on government, particularly in the sector of financial services. Clad in his old captain uniform, Lewis joined the protests outside NYC's Zuccotti Park on November the 17th and held up a sign that read, "NYPD don't be Wall Street mercenaries." He was highly critical of how the city's police had responded to the Occupy Wall Street movement. Lewis was taken into custody along with hundreds of other protesters who'd defied the authorities' orders to clear the streets. Photos of Lewis's arrest made headlines around the world. A photo showed him leaning against a building with his hands tied behind his back as a police officer stood over him. He was also seen in a video as riot gear-equipped police marched him towards a detainment vehicle. In January of 2012, Lewis reached a deal with Manhattan prosecutors and agreed to serve a 6-month period of unofficial probation in lieu of his disorderly conduct case being dropped. Today's topic was requested by Brent Fu 1119 and Dana Ripley 1200. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Thomas Webster. On January the 6th of 2021, a mob consisting of 2,000 to 2,500 people stormed the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., following the defeat of then U.S. President Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election. Those taking part in the raid believed that Trump had lost the race due to election fraud. In addition to looting and the destruction of property, 6 deaths and countless attacks on police officers were reported. Among those arrested for the raid was Thomas Webster, a former Marine and a retired police officer who'd spent over 20 years with the NYPD. Upon joining the mob that stormed the Capitol, the 50-year-old was wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a Marine Corps flag on a metal pole. He and other raiders were on the other side of metal barricades, which the police had put up in an effort to secure the Lower West Plaza area. Webster was recorded on body cams swearing at Metropolitan Police Officer Noah Rathbun and provoking him to take off his equipment and fight him. The ex-cop pushed the metal barricade into Rathbun's body before he began striking him with the metal pole. The officer was able to wrestle the weapon away, but Webster broke through the metal barricade and tackled him to the ground. He then choked Rathbun as he tried to remove his helmet and gas mask. Others in the mob began kicking the officer while Webster had him restrained on the ground and unable to breathe. Rathbun suffered multiple injuries but recovered in the aftermath. The FBI's Washington field office investigated the case and the ex-cop was arrested on February the 21st of 2021. He pleaded not guilty to the charges stemming from the attack, accusing Rathbun of instigating the altercation by punching him in the face. On May the 2nd of 2022, Webster was found guilty of 5 felonies and a misdemeanor stemming from the attack on Rathbun and the raid on the Capitol. Of those arrested and charged in connection to the incident, Webster was the one to receive the longest sentence, 10 years behind bars. Stephen M. D'Antuono, assistant director in charge of the FBI Washington field office, commented on the case and told the media, as a former police officer and U.S. Marine who took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, Thomas Webster knew the severity of his actions on January 6. These awful former officers are a shameful stain on their own reputation, but let's find out how the current police workers are a threat to one another. Right after number 1, we've got our previous release of cops who attacked other cops coming up, so stay tuned. Number 1. Granville Richins. On June the 3rd of 2023, Elizabeth Richins was found dead at the riverside home she shared with her husband, Granville, in Bournemouth, Dorset. The couple, both in their early 80s, had been approaching their 60-year wedding anniversary. When first responders went to the address, they found Elizabeth's body on a sofa, covered in blankets and with her arms on her chest. Granville, a former police officer, later admitted to his daughter that he'd fatally strangled his wife. At around 3:30 p.m., he wrote in his journal, "Peace, may God forgive me." The couple, originally from Scotland, had been caring for each other in their old age, but Elizabeth was reportedly crushed by pain. Her health dramatically deteriorated following a fall on May the 11th that left her with a fractured vertebra in her back. Her husband's journal detailed his growing frustration with the slow response from the National Health Service. One entry read, "So much time wasted consulting NHS people instead of action." On June the 3rd, Granville went food shopping with their daughter and upon his return found Elizabeth shivering and shaking. He strangled the woman to death, kissed her, and arranged her body on the sofa. Granville was arrested and pleaded guilty to manslaughter. The couple's marriage was, by all accounts, stable and content. The killing was interpreted as stemming from the ex-cop's continuous pain, hopelessness, and despair at his wife's condition. A psychiatrist determined that he'd experienced intense mental torment leading up to the killing, as he couldn't imagine life without her. Granville's lawyer told the court he could no longer give her life or happiness. He gave her the last good thing left to both of them, which was peace. A judge at Winchester Crown Court told Granville, "I'm satisfied you believe killing was an act of mercy," before handing him an 18-month sentence, suspended for 2 years. On November the 19th of 2021, the police in Sunrise, Florida, arrested a man by the name of Jean Semillian, who was accused of attacking people at a local business. The suspect was handcuffed, but officers struggled to wrangle him into the back of the squad car. It was around that time that Sergeant Christopher Pulley's, a 21-year veteran of the force, arrived at the scene. Pulley's, with a can of pepper spray in hand, hurtled out of his vehicle and made a beeline towards Semillian, who finally agreed to get into the car as the sergeant was swiftly approaching. Despite the suspect's newfound cooperation, Pulley's didn't relent as he subsequently berated and threatened the man. He repeatedly told Semillian to look him in the eyes before stating he was the wrong cop to play with. The suspect appeared to relish the sergeant's aggression and proceeded to egg him on, saying, "Do what you gotta do, man. You gonna mace? Mace me." As Pulley's profane threats continued, a female officer rushed up behind him and tugged on his belt, imploring him to ease off. At that point, Pulley shifted his ire towards her, shouting, "Don't ever touch me again," as he reached out to grab her by the neck. With both hands wrapped squarely around his colleague's throat, the enraged officer pushed her back, then instructed everyone at the scene to turn off their body cameras. However, Pulley's outburst up to that point had already been recorded in its entirety. Speaking to a local media outlet in the incident's aftermath, Sunrise Police Chief Anthony Rosa called Pulley's behavior that day disgusting and unprofessional, saying the body cam video speaks for itself. In the summer of 2022, it was announced that the disgraced cop, who'd already been relieved of supervisory duties and placed under internal investigation, was being criminally charged with felony battery, assault, and tampering with evidence. The following November, Pulley's retired from the force amid his ongoing legal proceedings. Number 6. Andrew Lawson. A pair of deputies from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office in Florida had their lives and careers irrevocably derailed as a result of an incredibly reckless decision made on December the 4th of 2022. In addition to being colleagues, deputies Andrew Lawson and Austin Walsh, both in their early 20s, were described as best friends and roommates. While off duty on the day in question, the two had been playing video games at their Palm Bay home but decided to take a break. Shortly thereafter, Lawson reportedly brandished a firearm and jokingly pointed it at Walsh. The former then pulled the trigger twice, erroneously believing the weapon to have been unloaded. Walsh was struck in the head by the bullet that was accidentally discharged, and although his panicked roommate immediately dialed 911, there was no chance of saving his life. The county sheriff said he was devastated upon receiving news of the incident, recalling his close relationships with both Walsh and Lawson. The latter was taken to the Brevard County Jail on manslaughter charges. He cooperated fully with the investigation, having been left distraught by his life-altering recklessness. After posting his $15,000 bail, Lawson moved back in with his mother while awaiting his next court appearance, slated for April of 2023. In the meantime, his employment with the Brevard County Sheriff's Office was terminated. Number 5. Nathaniel Hein. In January of 2019, St. Louis police officer Nathaniel Hein and his partner were hanging out at his South City home, despite the fact that they were on duty and supposed to be patrolling elsewhere. They were joined by 24-year-old Caitlin Alex, a fellow St. Louis officer and married military veteran who was off duty at the time. According to subsequent reports, Hendren and Alex used the revolver to engage in a reckless game of Russian roulette. Hendren reportedly emptied the weapon, then placed a single bullet back into the cylinder and gave it a spin. He pointed the gun away from him and pulled the trigger to no effect. Alex subsequently took the revolver and aimed it at Hendren and pulled the trigger, but it once again did not fire. Then Hendren pointed it at Alex and again pulled the trigger, but this time the weapon discharged. The bullet struck the young woman in the chest, and although the male officers rushed her to the hospital, she was later pronounced dead. While at the hospital, Hendren allegedly told his supervisor that the shooting was accidental and that he wouldn't want to harm Alex because he was in love with her and they were in an intimate relationship. He further indicated that they were planning on moving in together. Shortly after the incident, Hendren resigned from the force. He also faced criminal charges of involuntary manslaughter, to which he ultimately pleaded guilty. Hendren was consequently sentenced to 7 years behind bars, a punishment Alex's mother felt was far too lenient. While speaking with the local press, the woman said, "He should have gotten life in prison if it was up to me." In November of 2022, Hendren was denied parole, forcing him to serve out his entire term. Number 4. Harlem Brawl. In June of 2019, an alarming video surfaced online in which a pair of New York City police officers could be seen brawling with one another at the corner of West 116th Street and Lenox Avenue in Harlem. In the footage, 2 marked NYPD patrol cars, one with flashing lights, were shown parked along the side of the street. At one point, a uniformed officer emerged from the driver's seat of one of the vehicles and forcefully shoved another cop, after which a scuffle ensued. As the warring colleagues continued grappling with one another, one of them pressed the other against the side of one of the parked SUVs. Other NYPD officers eventually stepped in to break up the fight. The incident sparked an internal department review, although it's unclear how the investigation played out, and no details regarding what had triggered the dispute were made readily available to the public. Number 3. Aaron Wright. 3 officers from the Lafayette Police Department in Indiana were dispatched to a local residence in search of a wanted fugitive. On January 8th of 2019, although the suspect wasn't present at the home, the trio of officers, which included Lane Butler and her partner Aaron Wright, were met by a large and aggressive dog, prompting them to retreat outside. As they did so, however, Wright accidentally discharged his service weapon while following closely behind Butler, striking her in the shoulder. In body cam footage of the incident, Butler was shown collapsing to the ground immediately. While the third officer rushed over to tend to her, Wright flagged down another police car responding to the scene and placed his injured partner in the back seat, but an ambulance subsequently arrived to take her to the hospital. Although it wasn't visible in the video, the department later revealed that Wright had been attacked by the dog from behind, which allegedly caused the accidental discharge of his firearm. The Lafayette police chief said the incident hadn't been the result of an act of negligence, carelessness, or otherwise reckless behavior, but rather an unfortunate sequence of circumstances. Butler, who was only days away from celebrating her 3rd anniversary with the department, was brought to Franciscan Health Lafayette East in serious but stable condition. In a social media update posted about a week later, it was revealed that she'd been released from hospital. It was also reported that Wright wouldn't face disciplinary repercussions for his role in the accident. Number 2. Stephen Green and Joseph Tyler. In the early hours of March 25th of 2016, a handful of officers from the Atlanta Police Department congregated for dinner at the R. Thomas restaurant in Buckhead at the end of a late-night shift. According to a statement later released by a department spokesperson, 2 of the officers, later identified as Stephen Green and Joseph Tyler, started bantering back and forth about who would win in a foot race. Despite the seemingly trivial topic of conversation, tensions between the 2 men eventually escalated, and Tyler threatened to punch Green in the face. The latter was initially taken aback by his colleagues' hostility, but when Tyler issued a second threat, the 2 men came to blows and ultimately needed to be separated by the other officers. At some point during the altercation, Tyler allegedly pulled out his service weapon, but no shots were fired. Green, who'd been an Atlanta police officer for 5 years, was placed on administrative leave in the wake of the incident. Tyler, meanwhile, was also suspended but subsequently resigned from the force 5 days later. Number 1. Ismael Sosa. A shooting at Stoddard Wells off-highway vehicle area, an unincorporated section of Apple Valley, California, was reported to the authorities during the early hours of May the 3rd of 2020. Deputies from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office subsequently arrived at the scene to find 3 off-duty Los Angeles police officers, one of whom was suffering from a gunshot wound to the upper body. The victim, Mark Mascherano, was airlifted to a nearby trauma center where he was reportedly kept in stable condition. The ensuing investigation uncovered that the man had been shot by his colleague, 44-year-old Ismael Tamayo, while they and an off-duty supervisor were shooting guns on a camping trip. Tamayo was initially arrested on attempted murder charges, but later pleaded not guilty to a felony count of assault with a firearm. His police powers were stripped pending the outcome of both his criminal proceedings, as well as an internal administrative review. In April of 2021, an article in the LA Times went into great detail regarding Tamayo's documented mental health struggles, which was said to have played a large factor in the shooting. The man's attorney stated that at the time he fired his weapon at Mascherano, he was suffering from PTSD-related disassociation, which allegedly caused him to revert back to his military training, believing he was in a combat setting. The incident had also been precipitated by the trio of officers drinking copious amounts of alcohol for multiple hours, which was cited as another contributing factor. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend a year in a Supermax prison or as an undercover cop infiltrating a drug cartel? Let us know in the comments section below.